thought it was kind of insane that you can have secondary car, secondary phone, secondary clothes very easily, but you can't have secondary construction materials yet. They're all around us. I'm Rob Smith. I'm one of the co-founders of Material Index, and we're a company that enables reuse of construction materials at scale. I moved from the oil and gas industry, which is obviously quite damaging to the environment. And I moved into construction, and then I learned how much carbon is associated with concrete. I was like, wow, I've just kind of left one really polluting industry to join another one. We were in the office till like 2 or 3 a.m. on multiple nights. And I'm getting a bit of paper out. I'm like, well, how are we going to do all this?
Hey guys, I've got a quick request. Could you subscribe, like, and comment if you like the content we're making? It's really important to support the channel and carry on having great guests like we've had. So subscribe, like, comment. Very important. Thank you. Welcome to High Point, Rob.
Good to be here. Good to see you, Mark.
So I'm really interested in reuse at the moment, not only for the whole industry, but also for acoustics, how you do reuse acoustic materials. Can you actually reuse them and can you design them? But yeah, obviously more generally about the whole industry of reusing and design for disassembly. But so I'm very happy to have you here because you're probably the first expert. That we had another expert, Fabia Bowman, who was doing a lot of research on reusing some materials and recertifying them. But maybe the second one. But can I ask you to introduce yourself first, who you are, obviously the company you work for or you founded?
Yeah, well, pleased to hear you've got such a keen interest in reuse. It's definitely a growing space. So I'm Rob Smith. I'm one of the co-founders of Material Index, and we're a company that enables reuse of construction materials at scale. And we do that through a suite of sort of circular economy services that feed into an exchange platform, which I'm sure we can get into in this discussion. By background, I'm an engineer and I was a property developer in my previous life.
Yeah, obviously the purpose of that podcast is to know more about Material Index and all the products you offer. I've got other questions around how you implement reuse. But what's your background and when did you start thinking about Material Index?
My background is I'm an engineer, I'm a mechanical engineer, so I'm chartered in the Institute of Mechanical Engineers. I served 12 years in the oil and gas industry, actually, for my sins. So I started off, just wanting really good, solid engineering experience coming out of university. And so went into the oil and gas industry as somewhere where I could get that experience. I did a lot of very technical work, kind of designing completions in wells, optimizing performance, a lot of design work. And then it sort of became more project management roles, opportunity manager roles where you're kind of overseeing new developments. And then I eventually ended up working on the rigs as a rig manager. So I spent about 5 years offshore in the northern North Sea on the platforms on rotation as a offshore installation manager or an OIM. So basically in charge of the platform. So in that role, you're kind of accountable for everything. You're accountable for the lives of the people on the platform. You're accountable for the business delivery, the health and safety, the welfare, everything. And you're sort of managing managers. So I guess I'm an ops guy really at heart. I'm an operations specialist. And then the last kind of assignment I had before I left was on the Brent Alpha, which is one of Shell's kind of jewel in the crown assets. It was pumping out a lot of oil and gas during the Thatcher years, really funded, the UK economy. That was coming towards the end of its life. And a lot of the work there was around deconstructing that platform and getting it ready for kind of disassembly, and most of it was just recycled. So there's a lot of engineering work to getting it prepared for being completely removed, and it goes to Hartlepool and gets recycled. And the reason I mention that is because there's kind of parallels there with what I'm doing now with buildings, which I didn't anticipate at the time. But I always knew that oil and gas was never really the thing that got me excited. It was just good, solid engineering. So I left that to become a property developer. I've kind of been investing in the space during the time off from the rigs, and got into it.
When was this?
So this was back 2016. I was kind of investing from like 2013. I was an investor in my friends' developments, and then my investments kind of got bigger and bigger. And then I sort of left. I had some schemes ongoing while I was sort of still involved in rigs. Then I went full time at 2017 and helped scale that business. So I joined up with two others to have our own property development business that I then help scale through the sort of, the way I like to run businesses. So we did a lot of developments in Manchester and Cumbria up there. It was mainly like listed buildings. That was kind of our niche, was taking grade 2 listed buildings that were pretty run down and breathing life back into them. We did some new build houses as well. In the Northern Quarter in Manchester, we did quite an extensive basement up 7-story new build out of ICF, so insulated concrete formwork, which is fairly innovative. It was electric building. So I was trying to do stuff in that role that was more sustainable. I guess I moved from the oil and gas industry, which is obviously like quite damaging to the environment.
Yep.
Thought I'd left that behind, and I moved into construction. And then I remember like one of the first talks I went to at by Green Architecture Day or something like that I went to, and I learned how much like carbon is associated with concrete. I was like, wow, I've just kind of left one really polluting industry to join another one. And construction is really bad. I think it's like between 12 and 14% of global climate emissions come from construction. So that kind of hung over me, and I was trying to find ways of future-proofing that development business and making it more low carbon. So I was always looking at ways to do that. Kind of struggled. I mean, it's hard enough to be a developer anyway.
I was going to say, well done.
It's hard enough just making doing it successfully and making it profitable, but to try and also then like future-proof it and make it green is really hard. So I was trying to find ways of doing it, and then there were challenges in the market post kind of Brexit, the mini budget, material prices, all those things were making it quite challenging. So we kind of decided as a company we were on this sort of growth journey to kind of consolidate. We had a number of live projects, and we're like, okay, we just need to like batten down the hatches, deliver these projects, get through them. And because a lot of my work was done at the sort of pre-construction phase, at the sourcing the deals, appraisal, raising the finance, I would typically hand that over to my business partner. He was then managing the construction. So I had a bit more free time. So I started exploring other opportunities, and that's where I met my co-founder for Material Index. But the other thing I should mention, which is quite key, is in those developments that we were doing, I would often try and sell materials coming out of the buildings. So we would do like a renovation, some nice stone lintels and dressed stone pillars might be coming out as part of the renovation, and they'd be getting crushed to go in the skip, but I would take them aside and I would try and sell them, and I'd put them on Facebook Marketplace or Gumtree, or I'd end up selling them to one of the contractors on site, something like that. So I was already kind of in that role, trying to extract some value and reduce waste from our developments. And then I met my co-founder, Morgan Lewis, who's an architect, extremely intelligent guy. He'd been thinking about reuse for many years. As an architect, he'd sort of seen this growing trend for the demand of secondary materials from his sort of cohort of architects. He'd seen that coming many years ago. He'd tried to procure secondary materials, secondary brick slips for a company he worked for, and just found it challenging. Thought it was kind of insane that you can have secondary car, secondary phone, secondary clothes very easily, but you can't have secondary construction materials yet. They're all around us. So I was like, why does this marketplace not exist? Turns out because it's very challenging. But he'd experienced it from the demand side. I'd sort of experienced these problems from the supply side. And that's when we formed Material Index, which officially we incorporated in March 2023.
And are you still running or participating in that developer activities, or you're completely removed from it?
I'm completely removed. I think I sold my last property. It was a few weeks ago, actually, about a month ago. Divested the last asset. And I'm very pleased to have washed my hands of it all. I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed having my own business, and I just like doing things and seeing things end to end. Some of the experience I had in the oil and gas industry, you'd work on these 10-year developments where you'd be working, you never really see the outcome of your work. I always preferred the early work I did, where you sort of see you're involved in the planning, the execution, and the wrap up at the end, the whole life cycle. So I like that about property development, is you could see it and see the fruits of your labor but it's really hard. So how to anyone who's, making a success of it, it's still a challenging market. Like a lot of our clients now are huge developers and they're finding it difficult. So it was really hard. Like the transition from the developments to Material Index was really challenging because Material Index was just kind of taking off, and I still had all these properties in various businesses, and the illiquid nature of them just makes it difficult to wind those businesses down. But I'm pleased to say, like, the last one went about a month ago, so all distractions are gone.
So you've started to create Material Index. How did that go? How did you actually start it?
Yeah.
And what did you start doing?
Yeah, so the way it started is, so Morgan and I got together. We had a sort of few, I guess, sprint working sessions in late sort of 2022, figuring out, like, are we aligned on this problem? Are we working together in a way that's productive and useful? So we spent about 6 months like that, just having a few sessions. We involved some other people as well, and we're just sort of exploring this problem together. And then it was kind of January 2023 that we were right, let's commit to this and let's do it. Because when you're assessing someone to be a co-founder of a business, it is like you're going into a relationship with that person, and it could be a 10-year relationship, and or one, yeah, exactly. I think it's probably the number one reasons why startups fail is because of co-founders falling out. So that's really important. So there was a courting period where we were sussing each other out, and then from January 2023, we were like, right, let's do this. We're in, and we gave it like 1 week. We said, let's have this one intense week of working and see at the end. And basically, it's just not stopped since then. And it's just been like, we're on this surfing this tsunami is how it's felt since then. It's just gone really insanely busy, and it has not relented basically that whole time.
Can I stop here and ask you, what's your approach to new business partners? Because it seems like you've had quite a few. I seem to be thinking, we're keen to do something, let people know that we're keen to partner more, and then start a relationship quickly, but by still having some security measures. But if it works out well, let's do it and carry on. And if it doesn't work out, let's just be honest with ourselves and say it doesn't work out and stop it. What's your view to this?
Yeah, I think it's like any relationship, really. It's about the communication, and it's about just having that honest, upfront communication about what's going well, what's not going well. My previous co-founder relationship, we were friends for a long time before we went into business together. Like, we were really good mates, and I'd been a sort of investor in the business whilst I still had good job security. And so the leap out of like a paid, secure, nice 6-figure salary into your own business is a big leap to take. It didn't feel like a huge stretch because I'd known this guy for years and I trusted him. I'd seen the business he'd been building. That went through some of the most challenging things you can imagine a business has to go through. And we could have easily been at each other's throats at any point, but we got through it and we remained friends. And I think that's just down to our individual characters, I guess. I think forming Material Index, there was a sort of good, like I said, there was a courting period where we were sizing each other up. We did do like a founders questionnaire. We had these like 100 founder questionnaires, which you probably find online. That was actually a really useful thing to do. Like, if you're looking to found a business with someone, it asks you every question you could imagine about being a founder. Like, what are you in this for? Are you wanting to build a business to exit in 2, 3, 4, 5 years and take your paycheck and go? Or are you building like a long-term business that you want to take to IPO and dominate the world? Or so what kind of business are you building? Like, is it a lifestyle business? Like, how many days a week, how many hours a day do you want to work? Like, what's your salary expectation? Like, what are your future family expectations? So it goes into quite a lot of detail, and you answer these questions individually and then come together and discuss them. And that was really useful, having that conversation. So I'd advise anyone to kind of adopt that framework. And then, it's the communication. We've definitely had our rough patches while we're sort of finding out our sort of how we work and establishing our styles in the business. I think we found a good equilibrium now.
It's interesting. I'll have a look at that.
Yeah.
Founders questionnaire could definitely be useful for some of it.
Yeah, I'll send you a copy. I think I've probably got one on my hard drive somewhere. I'll fire it over.
Cool. So, yeah, back to material index. What did you do? What did you start doing at the beginning? Because I presume you didn't have the platform ready.
Yeah. So the way the premise for the business, so the vision is to build the one-stop shop for secondary materials. Call it a marketplace, call it a procurement platform, whatever you want to call it. We want to be the place that people come to buy and sell materials. But like how you get there is not always obvious, and the steps you take. The premise for us has always been that it's a supply constrained issue. That we've always believed that there is like people out there that will buy secondary materials if they can get assurance on like quality and depth of supply. So that was our starting point. So we're like, well, it's how do you guarantee that there's going to be enough supply? And so we initially started actually by going around all the reclamation yards in the UK. And we went up and down the country because we're like, look, there's stock that already exists in reclamation yards, and every big city will have generally one big reclamation yard. And then there's lots of like little ones, and there's like white van operatives who deal with secondary materials. So we spent a lot of time going around those, speaking to people from all walks of life who run these operations. Some of them are family, been passed down through families. They might be run by sort of gypsy families, for example, people who, just wheel and deal and can find value in these, what other people deem waste. So we started to build up quite a good idea of like stock, things like bricks and tiles, fireplaces, doors. And we're like, this is very antiquated. It's very disaggregated. There's surely a play here where we could, digitize it. And so we started talking to like stockyards about, how do you manage your stock? Would you consider like digitizing it and so on? So that was our initial angle. And then we actually think there's still a pretty good business there, but we pivoted quite quickly to doing what's called a pre-demolition audit. And that is something that's been done for years by demolition contractors as a way of basically like estimating how much steel, brick, concrete, textiles, whatever is in a building, essentially so they know how many skips that they need to order to get rid of all that material. But what happened, and timing was great for us, is the Greater London Authority brought in legislation that said for certain planning applications, so planning applications are basically referable to the mayor, which basically meant they have to be of a certain size, need to have a circularity statement attached. And part of that is having a pre-demolition audit. So suddenly it came into legislation to have one of these done. They're also, if you're going for like BREEAM accreditation, which is like a green building credential, you get points towards it for having a pre-demolition audit. And generally the quality of them is quite poor. So we identified this as an opportunity, and we pivoted with the intention basically of becoming like the best in class at doing pre-demolition audits. And that's been the foundation of our business, is building pre-demolition audits.
There's loads of questions popping up to my mind. So I'm mainly thinking about different materials to reuse. But I will ask you later a list of materials, and you can rate them. You can comment on them. But yeah, how were you doing those audits?
Yeah, so I mean, there's no like official legislation on like this is how you do a pre-demolition audit. There's guidance, like the BRE had guidance. Certain architecture practices had started producing guidance. So some of it was kind of conflicting. It didn't all align. So we basically spent quite a lot of time like swimming around in all that information and assessing it and tried to build up our own idea of what we thought a good pre-demolition audit was. And then we just started doing them, and we just started kind of leveraging our personal contacts, our existing network through architects and developers to go in and do them. And we were doing them for free initially. And we were going into, like 8,000 square meter offices with a Google spreadsheet. I remember the first one we did, and we just we got in through, I don't know, someone at a networking event spoke to someone who mentioned us, who then put us in contact with someone who needed this service. And we went and did it for free. And I remember me and Morgan just turning up and like kind of just sort of making it up in the spot, which was kind of cool because then you're actually thinking very practically, okay, we're now in this building. The approach that we had to the pre-demolition audits was different to how it was being done before. It's like we recognized early that, okay, the purpose of this pre-demolition audit is to facilitate a sale of the materials. That's the purpose, why we're doing it. So to do that, you actually have to go to the effort of cataloging everything individually. Like if you want to have a conversation about selling that door, well, the first thing they're going to ask is, well, what, they're going to want photos straight away. They might want some dimensions and they want to know what material it's made out of. So we recognize early you've got to capture everything on a component level. So we're like, right, let's just capture every component in the building.
For free.
For free, yeah. And a Google spreadsheet and a camera, that's all we had. And so we just got like a bit of paper. I remember getting a bit of paper out. I'm like, well, how are we going to do all this? And we just started marking out, dividing up the building into spaces and saying, well, like, I'll tackle this room, you go and tackle that room. And then it's like, okay, so I'll start off with all the stuff that sits on the floor, and then I'm going to tackle stuff that sits on the walls. So it's like we came up with like a systematic way where you get everything catalogued without missing anything. And it's quite, if you don't have a system, it's quite hard because there's something you might look but you don't see. So you really need like a system to do it. And that was how it kind of evolved. And we were doing these. So then we ended up doing a few of these on a Google spreadsheet. It was taking us about a week. We were in the office till like 2 or 3 a.m. on multiple nights. We had a third co-founder who was more techie. And so we would take photos, put it all in a Google sheet, and then he would build some sort of algorithms and spreadsheet to output a nicely formatted report. And those were our first pre-demolition audits. And we got really great feedback early on. They just didn't know like all of the work we'd done just to get that report to them. It was pretty painstaking. And then it was just very obvious, like, well, this clearly has to be digitized and it has to be enabled through tech. And then that's basically the journey we've been on for the last 18 months.
So you didn't, that podcast is going to turn into a business podcast, but anyway, you didn't think about the platform before doing the audits. You started doing the audits because you thought you'd start somewhere. And then you thought very quickly, this needs to be digitized.
I think we always knew it would be digitized. I think that's why we had this third co-founder who was a tech, he'd built apps for Wix. So he'd built apps for, in the sort of construction industry. So we kind of knew it would be digitized, but we needed to get going and understand what we built. And that's been how our sort of product development has been. So we would do stuff manually in spreadsheets and just figure out like how to do it. And then gradually we started building it into the platform. And then for a long time, we'd be working between the platform and the spreadsheets. And then, as more and more functionality from the spreadsheets goes into the platform, then the tool kind of evolves. So that was more around our sort of product development, I guess. Yeah.
And do you still do those audits for free, or you charge them now?
No, fortunately now we're able to pay. So I think we did a handful for free and then we quickly started paying. And then it was a bit about like, how much do you pay, figuring out our price point. But now that part of the business has really like grown. And we've got a team of auditors. It's, I guess, an environmental consultancy. So we charge to go in, catalog the buildings. We produce a report that feeds into planning applications, and that's a nice revenue generating business for us. And that's, I guess, what made us quite unique as a sort of new business is we were revenue generating actually quite quickly. So by that summer of 2023, we were making money for our audits, and now we have quite hefty targets within that department.
That's an interesting point because I don't know if you know, but we've just created a branch for Atelier Crescendo. So we've got the main building design, acoustic design, design for buildings. And then there's a branch that's called the Acoustic Design Library. That's the advertisement section here for the podcast. But there's online courses, there's services, so product development services as well for acoustics. But the main idea of the library is to create a platform where you have registry of materials. And it's not selling them, it's just talking about them, presenting them, putting visibility on them. And what we found is that businesses can make money quick and easily with not too much overhead. But then that's really useful if you want to obviously, if you don't have any investments, pre-investments, you can get cash fairly quickly, and then you can build a product alongside. And obviously, the product will pick up in terms of revenue much later, not as fast, but it seems like having services as well as a product that is more scaled and scalable works quite well.
Yeah, that's certainly been our experience. Yeah. We license our software, so we make it available to other people to take a license and do it as a kind of pure SaaS play. But actually, we found the take up of that is less than we were expecting. And to your point, clients prefer a service model where we provide services alongside that. And it might just be us coming and doing the audit, but it might be lots of follow-on services as well on advising what can happen with materials off the back of the audit.
That's interesting. And also doing services at a reduced cost or free sometimes is really useful to take off and much more efficient, even if you do communicate with clients that the audits or whatever service is not going to be that fee for years. It will evolve, but it's good to get some experience and get in the door of some projects and get something on your portfolio.
Absolutely, yeah. I think when you're starting off, it's always a balance, because you don't want to set the expectation that things are going to be free. And a lot of companies, they get it. They know that for you to stay around, they have to pay you. But I think when you're still developing your product and your service, it's not completely polished, then it's reasonable to do that at a discounted price. And we treat it as sort of like, yeah, we're doing this at a discounted price so we can actually get some feedback and input from you on how to further develop it.
Obviously, I don't want you to mention any competitors, but how's the business generally, the market? Is there more of a Red Sea or Blue Ocean or halfway between both?
No, there are existing players in the market, and there's new ones coming to market all the time. I've been at a conference this week, Footprint Plus, which is sort of net zero construction conference, and a lot of our competitors were there. Some of them we know quite well, and I mean, it's good. You want competition in the space. It shows that it's
worth going into.
Exactly, it shows it's worth going into. I think in our space, there's competitors doing kind of bits of what we do. So there's some that do audits, and they've been doing audits for years. That's a speciality. Some have a platform to upload materials, like a marketplace. Some focus on sort of demolition or materials to charities, things like that. But there isn't anyone as vertically integrated as we are, offering the end-to-end service. So I think that's where we've been able to get ahead, is having that kind of full integration end to end.
So how did you tackle the creation of the platform? So now the services you're providing, what services with the audits, is that correct? And then also another source of revenue is through the platform. Is there any others, or there's things halfway?
Yeah, so there's the audits that's quite established now, and that's a fairly healthy part of the business. There's the licensing, so other people who want to take a license of our software and use it themselves, and that's been slower, but it is picking up now. So we've sold a few licenses in the last couple of weeks, and so that's picking up, and that's great, and that's something we expect to grow in the future. And then the third revenue stream for us is commission on material sales. So again, the whole purpose of the audit, the reason we catalog in so much detail, is to facilitate the sale of materials, and we take a 20% fee on any materials that we sell, and that's the part of the business that we really want to grow and focus on in the future.
So what's the platform doing then? Can you describe it a bit? Obviously we can go on the website to check, but to anybody who's not seen it.
Yeah, so it's the way the platform works is as a mobile application, so it works on an iPad or your phone. One of our auditors or yourself, if you want to take a license, can go into the building. We pre-upload a plan, so you get a plan of the building, a floor plan. It can be like a JPEG or DWG. We upload that to the platform. The platform scales it, so it knows how big that is. And then you subdivide each floor plate into spaces, as I described from our very first audit. And you can do that as however you see fit. So you can be very granular and divide up every kind of room on the floor plate, or you can just create one big space on the floor plate. It depends how much accuracy you want. The platform then knows sort of the perimeter of that space. It knows the area. So when you go in and you start tagging items, so you might be in, an office, you take a photo of a floor tile, you start tagging attributes. So you give it a uni class, you give it a BCIS category, a name, dimensions. Then the platform will automate certain aspects. So it knows the unit size, therefore it can calculate the total area of carpet tiles and the total number of carpet tiles. And so we know like how many pallets you might need to get rid of it. You can define a height and a percentage covering a plasterboard, and it'll calculate for you how much plasterboard there is, or ceiling tiles. There's certain things built into the platform that speed up the quantification, whether it's through spatial inference or whether you're just going around tallying things. So you might add a certain brand of toilet. Every time you see that toilet, you can just tally it. So auditors are going through each space and adding assets. You add an asset once. If you see it again, you sort of tally it into the platform. You can kind of copy and paste spaces. And we've been working, like a lot of our focus has been on making that process as fast and accurate and easy as possible. That's what the last 18 months have been. And we've been exploring some AI integrations that will be embedded in the platform to speed that up. And the long-term vision being that you go with your phone and you scan the room with your phone, and it can automate everything. But we're not there with that yet, but we have got the cataloging down from that week it used to take us to less than a day now. So it's substantially increased the speed. Yeah. So with the going through every space, the platform will then amalgamate all the assets from each of those spaces into a catalog. So you've then got sort of an inventory of all those materials in the building, which is often the first time clients or the professional team have seen that sort of information. It's kind of staggering how poor the data we have of buildings is, and how little time actually a lot of the team spend on site. So to have someone go there with a camera and catalog every component suddenly becomes a really useful data set. And like, oh, right, we didn't know we had those really nice timber doors in this building, or we might calculate the steel in a big structure, because a lot of our teams are architects and they can kind of figure out from a site visit and what plans are available, what the steel in the building is, and the client might not have had any, data on that. So we will do a data mining exercise as well to see what's available. Sometimes we might get a Revit model, which is great. If there's a Revit model, we can do a takeoff from that. But often the information is quite limited. So this data set becomes really valuable. And then once you have it, it then enables a really useful conversation amongst the professional team, because they can then log into the platform and start setting pathways for those materials and making decisions around where those materials are going. And a lot of the time these conversations are happening anyway, like they happen on site, but they happen, the week before the demolition contractor is there, or even like the day he arrives, and it's kind of pointing at things. Oh, well, actually that's staying, that's going, or we might use that somewhere else. So these conversations are kind of happening, but now we've provided a tool that makes it all digital and facilitates a more useful conversation. So these pathways get set for the building, preferably like one in advance of deconstruction. That forms some analytics. It can tell you, okay, this is all the weight of materials identified, and we're typically now doing that more accurately than anyone else because we're adding everything up on a component basis. And it will tell you of all those materials what is going for reuse, either like on-site, off-site, retaining in situ, or to your waste and recycling streams.
Got lots of questions.
Good.
How do you identify the hidden materials? I'm thinking about acoustics, obviously, because a lot of acoustic materials like underlays and acoustic clips or things like this, acoustic hangers, they're all hidden.
Yeah. How
do you assess the reusability of those materials? Or maybe it's something that you don't do it yet.
Yeah, it's challenging. So our audits are like they're non-intrusive audits. So we're not like a structural engineer knocking holes in walls to look at steels. Ours is a non-intrusive audit, we might lift the ceiling panel to look behind it. We'll lift up some raised modular flooring to see the branding. But yeah, there is certain things like that which we're not getting a proper look on. We'll do, like I say, we'll do the desktop exercise to assess any spec data, any O&M manuals, any data like that. We'll gather it and infer what we can, or speak to the professional team, but we're not identifying it. So there is potentially stuff we are missing, which, is on our roadmap to start figuring out how do we start identifying those materials. A lot of what we look at is a system. A wall is a system of materials. So what is behind that plasterboard? So that is something we are working on. But happy to take any advice you can give. We will. Yeah, we'd love to have it. Speaking to the experts, they kind of know. A lot of experts know how, what the tells are for certain things. And we can do it with certain things because we've got architects, so they can figure out from looking at the exterior of a building and a few things what the likely structure is. And we've got structural engineers that we can bring in, and MEP engineers, and they will look and say, oh, this is most likely like a steel frame building or concrete building. So we do draw on those experts. And so for acoustics, maybe there's tips and tricks that you have.
We're here.
Yeah, for how do we know what's behind those walls? So that's what we do. We speak to our partners.
We are starting, so another marketing pitch. We are advising clients on, so manufacturers mainly, or suppliers, on they've got solutions and how to develop the solutions for a certain structure. It's not just concrete, it's also timber. And we're also pushing for the reuse, or for reusing solutions that can be reused and recycled or upcycled. And there's the whole question on how can they be taken out? Are they going to be durable in terms of performance, or they're going to lose some performance? And it would be nice to have a narrative like this when you design or suggest an acoustic material. How demountable is it? And usually it's very difficult. Also, you may not be able to loose lay some of the products, so you have to glue, look some serious bonding agents or means, and therefore there's going to be damaged if you take it out. There's loads of really interesting questions from my perspective.
Yeah. I guess this is a good point to talk about material passports. So that's quite a hot subject in the industry. And when we moved into the space, all the talk was around material passports, which can be defined in many different ways, but is essentially like a digital representation of a building component. You can argue all day long about what attributes you attribute to that material passport, but that's what it essentially is, some sort of digital representation of the building. There's a lot of players that do that. We focused on the pre-demolition audits because we were just interested in what's coming out of the building. But we do material passports, and this is a growing part of our business now, mainly because of the demand, that we also catalog what's going into a building. So we use our same piece of software, but instead of cataloging the materials before they come out, we're cataloging them as they go in. So typically after first fix and final fix, we'll go in and perform our audit. And the beauty of doing that is you are capturing materials that would otherwise be hidden, and you also got all that spec data. So you've got all that acoustic information, you've got specification, you've got how it was constructed, how it might be deconstructed. So you can tag all that information into the platform with the product, so that at its next cycle, if it's 5, 7, 30 years away, you've got that information. So that's great. If you can have that information up front, that's the end game, really.
I need to dive deeper into this personally, because as an acoustician, I'm sure a lot of acousticians would think like this, where they see a product that comes from a site, they'll want some test data showing that the product achieves the performance that they want. Otherwise, they've got their BI there hanging, and then how, obviously, maybe you need to commission some retesting. Obviously, that's really expensive. So how do you tackle all this, the performance and cost aspect of creating a passport? I presume this is what... That, and also maybe there's some standards that would need to be developed for acoustics, but other aspects as well, not just acoustics.
So there's a couple of ways we deal with it. I guess we're now moving the conversation from like the auditing side to the reuse side. So our strategy for that is once we've catalogued the building, we're then using that catalogue to sell materials to resellers. So we actually sell into a network of small businesses that deal with secondary materials. So a lot of the time they have the means to deal with that. They might repurpose or clean or prepare materials to go into their sales channels. So in that instance is less of an issue for us because they pay us for the materials. They do what's necessary to them to sell them on, and they might be selling into like social housing, private landlords, maybe even going abroad, things like that. I think what is starting to happen more now is we are getting direct requests for materials. So we're getting architects and designers coming to us with their shopping list of materials that they want. And we are looking to supply directly from them, either from sites that we've audited or from our resale network. And then they are asking more questions are coming up on spec and performance. And so in those instances, we will look to partner with the relevant body. So, you know, we might work with a light remanufacturer, send lights to them. They can recertify it, test it, send it back. Bricks, so there's an established market for secondary bricks, which has been around for years. And typically like a bricklayer will have the expertise to know from looking at a brick and tapping it and so on, and, you know, whatever tricks of the trade they have to establish like whether that could be reused. But that's because they're maybe reusing it on someone's single story extension. Now, as the inquiries start coming in from like big engineering practices for the reuse of bricks, the question is around, well, what certification do you have? So in that instance, we can step in and arrange testing. So yeah, like bricks, you can get them freeze 4 tested, a mouthful, or like compression tested. And I guess with like acoustic elements, you can do the same. You could get in, I presume they're coming, like you also come and do acoustic testing. It just adds overhead. So it just does it make sense for the cost to do that on secondary materials? But that's something we are exploring more, is like who are the people that we need to bring in to recertify and test components to facilitate their reuse.
I was wondering also is because a lot of again, on acoustics, the acoustic labs, they're quite expensive, but also because they've got a big certification that recognizes them as really thorough testers and is really good quality testing. But do you sometimes need absolutely that very, really, really thorough testing, and you just want to have an idea of the performance of the product or the material?
It's not been a blocker for us so far, if I'm honest, but I think that's because we've been dealing with a lot of the early adopters. Well, it's either because we're dealing with resellers and this is not an issue. Like they'll deal with all that. But when we have gone directly to developers or fit out contractors, it's usually with the early adopters, and they will just take a view of certain things. So design and build contractors are pretty good because they can take a view. They've got that autonomy. Some of the developers we work with are just willing to take the risk on some things, but we anticipate it will become more of a thing. We're getting more of these questions around spec coming in.
And so that platform is on a SaaS basis, so software as a service with obviously a license. How can you detail a little bit more if you can?
Yeah, so I mean, our auditing tool is, we either can do it as a serviced, like a consultancy basis, or you can take a license to audit. The marketplace, any buildings that are audited, T-3 months from demolition, those materials appear on our marketplace. And then we share that with either resellers or fit out contractors or clients, anyone who's interested in procuring secondary materials. So it's not a public marketplace. It's a sort of private marketplace where we share a link or a login with certain players that we know are kind of serious about procuring reuse. So we're not sort of swamped with just tire kickers essentially. So that's a free service to access those materials. If you want to buy secondary materials, we will screen people, share the link with them, and then sell them materials and take our fee for that.
So How do you, let's say I'm an architect or I'm an acoustic consultant and I'm in fairly traditional design and like structure, and I would like to design with reuse in mind, reusing materials in mind. How do you deal with it? Do you provide any guidance as well?
Yeah, we're getting more and more inquiries like this as it just gathers momentum in this space. So yeah, we've got, a lot of our team are architects. We've hired someone specifically into our exchange team who has got background in supply of materials and working with architects to specify materials. So she's got that experience, and we've brought her in specifically to work with that growing demand of architects who need kind of escorting on that journey to procuring secondary materials, because we anticipate that's going to grow. At the moment, the way it works is we're like, send us your shopping list, like what's your bill of materials of items that you want. We will identify stock from our marketplace for you. We'll share that with you, whatever you're interested in. We can arrange samples. So we're often sending samples of lights or carpet tiles to architects to review, working with them to see what information they need. And so just sort of bringing them on that journey essentially. And yeah, like whatever it is, ironmongery, doors, fit out, we will work with them to try and provide as much information, but it's got to be a bit of a two-way thing. So we're having more traction, with the architects who will take a bit of a view on things, I guess.
So how do you store those materials? Say before the demolition, you do your audit, and then you identify the materials that will be very useful to be reused. So, and obviously there will be a time when the material will be disassembled. How do you store all this?
So if we're selling to our resellers, we don't need to store it. We'll sell it straight to them, and they'll deal with the storage and the logistics and everything. So our terms of like pickup are always like demo contractor. It's agreed, ideally like pre-tender. We've been involved in our audit has formed part of that tender, and they've provided a price to the client for deconstruction. And so they prepare materials at ground floor for collection, and our buyers come from ground floor, collect those materials and take them to their own storage facility to resell them. In instances where, an architect has come on, logged in, seen something they want from a building that's due to come down, in a month or so, we can provide storage. So we have storage partners that we use. And this is something we've done recently. So a client identified a bunch of furniture coming out of a building, but they didn't need it till September. The strip out was happening like early May. So we just provide them a fee quote for, this is the purchase of the goods, this is the overhead for storage. Do you want to go ahead? Yes, great, 50% up front. And then we've put that into storage. We handle that whole process for them. So we've got teams that will go in that instance, pre-deconstruction, do the strip out of the furniture, store it, and they will reassemble that in the client's office when they're ready.
Great, that's really interesting. Do you have any, before I go into the materials, do you have any case studies? I saw that there's obviously you got a few projects on the website so people can go and see it. Any interesting case studies or any interesting buildings you've decommissioned?
Many. We've done so many projects now. I guess I'd say like 80% of what we do is London offices, just because the rate of fit out is rapid. We're based in London. That's where there's most traction. So that's most of what we do. So it'll be like the fit out elements of a London office, going back to like Cat Ale or like a white box. But we've audited all kinds of things like car parks, gymnasiums, shopping centres, farms, all kinds of things. But an interesting one is a pumping station. We did for the London Legacy Development Corporation. We did a pumping station.
I've got a picture just in front of me now.
Yeah,
I was going to ask you.
That one was great. It was Thames Water pumping station. They vacated the site. They literally dropped the keys and left. All kinds of like specialists, hydraulic valves, inline valves, centrifugal pumps, all kinds of control centers, things like that. And so it's kind of out with our expertise, but our expertise is joining the dots. So we did a full survey of that building. We did the cataloging, and then that informed the conversation with resellers. And we go out to our network and we find specialists that understand those bits of kit, how to deconstruct them and where to sell them. And so we managed that whole process. We got specialists who came in, stripped out the materials of value. They sold them, rebated. We took our 20% and we rebated what was left to the client, and they got £12,000 worth of value out of that, which offset their construction costs. So that was a nice example of kind of unusual products that we brokered. I mean, we've got loads of examples of office fit out brokering, so I can share those separately if you want.
One question I had is on the cost. So who's, presumably it's the owner of the building, or who's getting the money, or do they like the distributors or whoever manufactures, they buy the materials, I presume. They don't get them for free.
Yeah, our model is like, we're trying to get the best price for the materials. Like, our whole premise is like, these secondary materials have value. Okay, it might not be a lot at this stage, but in future we think there'll be significant value attached to these, and that's what we're trying to realize. So we're doing a lot of price discovery all the time through our brokering. We're doing price discovery. Certain products there's already like a market for, and there's price discovery is taking place. Other ones, not really, and we're setting the price for those and just figuring out like how much can we sell these for. So we're incentivized because we take a 20% cut because of the effort we go to, and because we're a dedicated team selling. We'll always, pretty much always get the best price for our client, even after our fee's been deducted. And then that 80%, that can go to the building owner, the client, or it can go to the strip out contractor, or it can be split between the two. So whoever takes the proceeds, it doesn't make a difference to us. It often depends when we've been brought in on the project who gets it. But either way, we're just trying to get the best value for those materials.
Do you also provide design advice on how to design for disassembly? Because you've got pretty good knowledge now of how to dismantle a building and how easy it is to just take out reuse some materials, and how difficult it is for others.
We haven't got too deep into that yet. I think we're still so busy at the early stages. What we do provide is like deconstruction instructions. So what we do know is like, how do you get a building disassembled in a way that preserves the value of those materials? And it's different for every product. So some things it's really straightforward, like lifting a carpet tile to reuse it is very little different to how you would lift it to throwing it away. So that's simple. But then other things like glass partitions, which you might traditionally just smash and then sweep all the debris up into a bin, is very different to if you want to deconstruct it, and then you might need a specialist contractor. So we get very involved in providing guidance to the strip out contractor, the demolition contractor, on how the building should be deconstructed. And we're starting to build up an idea of like what the incremental time and therefore cost of doing that is. And again, it varies product to product. So we work very closely with demo contractors for that reason. I think to your point, yeah, I mean, I was speaking to an architect yesterday about that, about how we, start informing the design for disassembly discussion, but it's kind of further down our roadmap, I guess.
Let's dive into some materials. One that is very obvious, maybe. Obviously, it's concrete, and you obviously would discuss about the reusability or demountability of some of them and how successful it is to reuse them. Concrete. What's your opinion on it, and what's your experience?
We've not reused concrete before, other than recycling it, using it as aggregate. We have never classified in any of our projects concrete for reuse. We might, classify it for retain if the structure is getting retained in situ. From the waste hierarchy point of view, that's great, but we've never set it to reuse. It's either retain or recycling, basically. We have seen British Land actually are doing some really innovative work on reusing concrete slabs. So in one of their buildings, they've done a trial taking out a concrete slab. It's gone into a university for testing. And if they can demonstrate that can be reused, then they're planning to do that on an entire floor. So there's, a really innovative architecture practice. And it's kind of that piece of work has been led by a guy called Adam Osinski, who's a real advocate of reuse. So that's really interesting. We're watching that space because that would just be really move the dial if that can happen. But for us, concrete is one of those materials that's, not for reuse yet.
How about reusing concrete and crushing it into small gravel and sand and using it for mass and loose laying it on I mean, we love it as acousticians because it's really easy mass to add.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of typical. That happens. That's quite an established practice.
Yeah.
So we don't get too involved in that part of it. We are all, we are primarily about reuse, like taking a brick and using it as a brick, like using it as its intended form. So that pathway we would classify as waste/recycling, and the demo contractors have got the expertise in doing that. It's quite established practice. So yeah, we would expect that to happen as a minimum nowadays.
One of my favorites that we're really looking at the moment for acoustics is concrete paving slabs.
Yeah.
You see a lot of them on Facebook Marketplace as well.
Yeah.
What's your experience with them?
I don't think we've done many concrete paving slabs. We've done like stone, like really a lot with stone, because of the nature. A lot of the buildings we deal with in London have got really nice like stone pavers. So those were fairly regularly. There's a resale market for those. So there's stone buyers and sellers. So from our audit, we will sell it on into that market. Sometimes site to site. I don't know if we've done any of the traditional kind of concrete pavers, but I'll inquire with the teams. I'll be surprised if we haven't. But there's no reason why those can't be reused. Absolutely, yeah. Like you say, they're on Marketplace all the time, Facebook Marketplace.
We love them because they're obviously really heavy and really dense, and they're fairly stiff. And so we're just thinking at the moment, but with loads of different types of tests in mind for gyms, for example, where you need to make the floor heavier, although there might be a load limitation. Or if you want to create a floating floor system for weights, the weight areas, then you need to have a fairly dense one. But instead of pouring a concrete slab, which is usually needed for robustness, you could create a system with paving slabs with some stiffness. And then, sometimes also for timber buildings, you need more mass. So how do you increase the mass without using concrete? And maybe if you had paving slabs, maybe not throughout the building, just for specific areas, you could definitely use that. And maybe screwing them, that might be quite intense in terms of time. But then you put your other resin layers or acoustic layers on top, but like adding that base mass on the
timber that's really interesting. Yeah, I guess if there's any scenarios where you can substitute pavers for concrete and use secondary pavers, we should be doing it, right? So I wasn't really aware that was something you can do. So that's really useful. I'll feed that back to the team and look out for some. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've heard also that there's some projects where for really high towers where concrete was very hard to bring to the upper floors. So instead of that, they've been using paving slabs.
Wow. Okay.
But I don't know if they were.
And using like whole paving slabs, just like laying it like as a patio or something like that.
Yeah, and either bonding all of them with some grout or something like this.
Wow.
I don't think they were, maybe bonding also them to the subfloor. But obviously they're easier to bring than concrete with you need a massive pump, very powerful pump.
Yeah, I mean, if you know any projects where they're looking to do that, we can almost certainly supply the pavers either through a reseller, like secondary pavers, because that would have a big impact on their embodied carbon. Let me know.
We'll have some chats offline then.
Sure.
About this. Bricks, we talked about them earlier.
Yeah, bricks is there's a pre-established market for secondary bricks that's existed for years, and we're involved in that. So we sold, not long ago we sold 60,000 bricks that come from a developer. We sold that into our supply chain. We're sourcing bricks at the moment for an architect who's looking for basically like low carbon secondary bricks. So that's fairly established. If anyone's got any, let us know. We'll help you sell them, or we can procure them. So yeah.
I mean, I wrote timber, but it's very broad, isn't it? So let's timber studs and timber-based board systems.
Pretty much timber in all its forms gets reused. Like obviously your traditional hardwood timbers, floorboards or doors fly off. Like people are chomping at the bit for those. Softwoods, a lot of community projects will still take any softwood products and repurpose them. So we sometimes donate those. There's lots of like wood, like community projects based around reusing wood. We sold recently, like from a logistics shed, a whole mezzanine floor that was made up of ply boards. So we sold 40,000 of those or something like that, which was quite a decent stack of money back to the client. So yeah, timber's a good one.
Plasterboard.
Yeah, we've only done a little bit of plasterboard, but that is something we're looking to do more of, moving into more sale of plasterboard. Because it is possible if you can remove the overboard with the plaster on it, which has been skimmed, it's usually double boarded in most commercial buildings, so that the board underneath is completely preserved. So you can remove that, stack it, and reuse it. So we've done a little bit, but that's definitely an area we want to expand into more. Is reusing plasterboard. One
that I love as well is kitchens. I remember there was a channel so we bought a house a few years ago, and I was following a guy on YouTube renovating his own house. And that's the first time I heard about buying a kitchen secondhand, dismantling it. And he said, I can't remember, it's the Renovation Family, I think it's called.
Okay.
I don't know if you know this. But he said, you can't imagine how many secondhand kitchens there are at really decent quality. And that's what we've done recently.
Oh, nice one.
With a concrete worktop for like maybe 10% of the price of a new kitchen.
You didn't use paving slabs for the worktop then?
No, but I wanted to do a concrete worktop.
Yeah, they look good.
It's quite intense.
Yeah,
but so what? I presume you also dismantle kitchens.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a market for a long time. I know a few businesses that make money for off residential kitchens. So like you get these big houses, impressive houses that have got like 100 grand kitchens in them or something like that, and they want a new one every few years, and so they get ripped out. So there's a market for selling those, like the high-end residential ones, but we do a lot of the commercial office ones, and there's definitely a market for those. T-points, that's a big thing, with the zip taps and everything like that. There's definitely a market for those. Yeah, before I started Material Next, I did the same. I remember sprucing up my kitchen, and I went on Gumtree and I got a load of, I kept the carcasses, they were fine. And I just got, they start looking a bit old, or, if it's laminated or starts peeling. And I went and got some hardwood doors from someone that's giving them away. And I got a joiner just to sort of cut them to size and then blast sand them. And I just painted those. And now I've got like hardwood cupboard doors with new knobs on them. And I can resand them repaint them as many times as I want in the future. So again, one of those things I was already doing, and now we're trying to do it with commercial kitchens. But yeah, the carcasses are often in good condition, and people are happy to save money on a cheaper fit out.
Mineral wool.
Yeah, mineral wool. I don't think we've done much mineral wool, but again, it's one of those products that there's no reason why we shouldn't. I would say, like, in this space, there's still so much value that we're leaving on the table. That's kind of what we're trying to grow into as a company. We're still relatively new and we're moving a lot of materials, but we recognize there's still a lot that we're not getting to because we just haven't, we're always time bound by the strip out, but also finding those partners that will take things. So mineral wool is something we've not really brokered much of, but maybe you'd be a good conduit for buyers of secondary mineral wool potentially. I don't know.
We know how intense they are in terms of energy to produce those materials, and obviously there's alternative bio-based. But if we knew that there was, I think I know a few suppliers who will produce sell mineral products from recycled materials. But it's got some benefits and some good benefits and good performances. So if we can reuse mineral wool, it'd be amazing.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Let's make it happen.
How about bio-based materials? As we're talking about bio-based insulation. Or bio-based insulation. Maybe it's not used too much.
Yeah, we've not really come across any, I guess mainly because, we're dealing with London offices where I guess not a lot of these materials don't really appear. We're about to do our first project for the National Trust. Maybe that's somewhere where we might come across some of these materials, but we haven't come across, that I can think of, any bio-based materials to reuse yet.
And another one that is really acoustic related, vibration isolators from me. You may not, maybe yes, because you're working on London buildings. Basically, when you build a building, and it's just above a tube line or near a train line, you need to isolate the building to ensure that the vibration is not creating irradiated noise in the more sensitive rooms. So have you ever come across this yet?
No, not yet. I mean, we sell a lot of MEP equipment. Like, that is something that moves, and generators and things like that. So I guess that's where you'd find these bits of kit. But I'd maybe be interested offline to understand how we properly identify them in a building, and who might be interested in buying them, what sort of value they retail for. So yeah, that'd be a good one to pick up. Yeah, this is great because there's constantly new products that we're identifying as potential for reuse. So anything like that's really helpful for us.
There's a lot of suppliers and manufacturers that will pledge to take their products back. Is that right? Is that true?
It's true. A lot of them pledge to, but very few actually do. Yeah. So they all talk about take-back schemes, but in our experience, very few actually have a credible take-back scheme. It's changing. Certain ones are further ahead than others. So SAS ceiling tile manufacturers, they're quite well known in the industry now for taking back their products. But again, it's only sort of one or two product lines in what they supply, which is fair enough. It's early days. Ironmongery, I just referenced that. That's who we were speaking to this morning. There's companies that take back their own ironmongery products. So there's a few that are starting to come into the market, and we think that'll just keep growing. So we're always having those conversations with them. We're looking to partner with. That's always the first place we go when we're brokering materials off a site. The first place we go is does the manufacturer have a take back? Can we just send it to them? And then we go down the list through our resale network, direct to buyers, and then sort of charities and communities.
So do they have to buy back their products or just retake them?
Well, that's the negotiations that take place. Okay. So yeah, an example of SAS, initially they were charging quite a lot of money to take them back, because they're like, well, we have to provide certain crates and to go in, we're going to provide logistics to collect them and so on. And so they were charging for that service. And then with time, as they've kind of ironed out their own processes internally and taken feedback from clients, they've become cost neutral on that. So they'll take it back for free. Saint-Gobain, huge multinational, but do a lot of glass. They'll actually pay to take glass back now. So that's great. And the clients love that. And that's where we think the industry should be, that these manufacturers should be paying to take their materials back because they're getting, a raw product fed into their system. So I think as it evolves, you need some competitors in the market. That will start happening.
How do we, obviously the website is material-index.co.uk.
Yeah, that's us, material-index.co.uk. Yeah.
I'll put the link of the website in the description. Any other useful links, or how do we get in touch with you?
Yeah, it depends what reason you want to get in contact. If you've got a building that's coming up for deconstruction, you'll need an audit. So I think there's audits at Material Index. You can reach out. Olivia runs that team very effectively. If you're looking for materials, trying to source materials, you can do materials at Material Index. Or if you just got a general inquiry, hello at. We work with kind of everyone across the supply chain. So all the way up from your large blue chip developers like Derwent, British Land, Related Argent, Canary Wharf Group. We're working with all those guys regularly, all the way through, the project managers often appoint us. We're working with architects, fit out contractors, tenants, manufacturers. I was on a call this morning with an ironmongery manufacturer around how can we identify their product and send it back to them. So we're working just across the board with everyone in the supply chain. So if anyone wants to reach out, find our details on the website. We could good to connect.
Great. Thank you very much. It's been great to chat to you. We're on time. Hopefully I'll see you soon. And thank you for accepting the invite.
No worries. It's been really good. I feel like we already scratched the surface, but it's still been sort of over an hour, hasn't it? But
we could, yeah, exactly. But we can organize other events, other recordings and other episodes if we feel the need to. So yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you again.
No worries. Thanks,
hopefully
Mark.
I'll see you soon.
Yeah. Cheers, Mark. Really enjoyed it.
Bye, Rob.
Thanks.